Moonlight spilled like silver over the quiet village at the edge of the forest. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and pine, and a chilling wind whispered through the narrow cobblestone streets. In a small, candlelit house near the outskirts, Celine stood by the window, her reflection staring back at her with the weight of memory and resolve. Tonight was the night of Darian's wedding, the man who had once claimed her heart, the man whose arrogance had shattered it. Celine's fingers traced the smooth edge of a silver pendant she had worn since leaving him. A gift from another life. It was a reminder of who she had been and who she had become. She was no longer the woman who had trembled under Darian's charm or bowed to the demands of the noble court. She had faced dangers beyond human understanding, walked in shadowed forests where whispers of ancient magic lingered, and survived. She was strong now, though her heart still bore the scars of their past. Outside, torches lined the path to the village chapel. Guests in elegant gowns and polished boots moved with laughter and light conversation. Oblivious to the storm brewing in the shadows, Darian, handsome and confident, was already at the center of attention, boasting of his wealth, influence, and the new bride who would soon take his hand. Celine's lips curled in a faint, almost bitter smile. He thought tonight would be a triumph of pride over pain, a reminder that he had won. But he did not know the world had changed, and neither had she. As Celine stepped from the shadows into the moonlight, her cloak flowing behind her, the guests turned in quiet surprise. Whispers moved like silk through the crowd. She was taller now, her presence commanding, and her eyes dark and knowing held a calm strength that none had expected. Darian's smile faltered as he caught sight of her. The laughter in the room dimmed, replaced by a tense silence. And then, from the forest that bordered the village, a sound rolled over the hills, a low, haunting howl that seemed to pull at the edges of the night itself. The villagers froze, instinctively glancing toward the trees. It was not just any wolf. This was something greater, older, filled with power that made the blood shiver in the veins of those who heard it. Celine did not flinch. She knew the sound well. Her heart quickened not from fear but from recognition. From the shadows, moving with regal grace, emerged Kaelin the Lycan king. His form was larger than any wolf, yet human in shape. His silver hair catching the moonlight, and his amber eyes burning with a quiet, restrained power. Every movement was calculated, every glance filled with authority, and he was walking beside her, silent and protective. The guests could not look away. Gasps echoed through the hall as Kaelin entered, his presence a living myth brought to life. Darian's jaw tightened. He opened his mouth to speak, to mock, to reassert the superiority he had once held over Celine, but the words caught in his throat. No one dared challenge the Lycan king. Not in this hall. Celine's chest rose and fell with steady breath. She met Darian's gaze, and for the first time in years, she felt a calm certainty. She had survived him, and she had risen beyond him. Yet beneath that certainty stirred a complicated storm, memories of laughter in the moonlight, of hands clasped in promise, of the sharp ache of betrayal. She did not deny the past, but she refused to let it define her. Kaelin's eyes softened ever so slightly when they fell on her. A small, almost imperceptible gesture that spoke of trust, respect, and a bond forged through shared danger. Their connection was a silent language, one that Darian could not read, and the guests only sensed, but could not name. The air was charged. A delicate tension between past and present. Desire and restraint. Human fragility and supernatural power. The ceremony continued with strained politeness. Celine walked through the hall, her head held high, her cloak sweeping the polished floor. Darian attempted to speak, his voice sharp with attempted control. But every word seemed small against the weight of the moment. Guests shifted uneasily, as the presence of the Lycan king filled the room like a living storm. Celine's mind wandered briefly to how her life had changed. After the heartbreak, she had wandered into the wild lands, where humans seldom dared to tread. There, she had met Kaelin under circumstances of peril and trust. Their bond had formed slowly, built on survival, loyalty, and a quiet understanding that transcended words. She had learned the ways of the Lycan clans, the rhythms of the moon, the weight of power that came not from wealth or title, but from respect and honor. Darian's eyes were burning with confusion and a growing sense of unease. He could see the change in her, but he did not understand it. He could not comprehend the nights she had spent under silvered moons, the lessons learned in danger, the quiet strength she had earned. His pride was a brittle shield against the truth that Selene had outgrown him. The first act of confrontation came subtly. Darian approached her under the guise of politeness, offering a strained greeting. Selene's reply was measured, polite but distant, each word a quiet assertion of her autonomy. "I see your wedding is beautiful," she said, her voice steady. Yet her eyes held the memory of what had been. Darian's forced smile did not reach his eyes. He tried to laugh, to charm, but Kaelin's presence made his arrogance falter. Outside, the wind stirred again, carrying whispers of old curses and ancient power. The villagers felt it in their bones, though they could not name it. Selene felt it too, a familiar thrill that reminded her why she had walked into the unknown, why she had survived. She was no longer just a woman wronged. She was a force to be reckoned with, and she was standing tall at the center of a gathering where her past sought to define her. And then it happened. A shadow moved through the edge of the hall. Subtle at first, a flicker of movement. The candles flickered as if disturbed by a hidden presence. Darian's brow furrowed in alarm. His pride had left him blind, but the air now carried a tension he could not ignore. Selene's hand brushed against Kaelin's, a small but deliberate gesture of unity. Their bond was unspoken, yet stronger than any claim Darian had ever made. The guests murmured again, unease rippling through the hall. The forest outside seemed to lean closer, as though listening. The moonlight shimmered against Kaelin's armor, glinting like a promise of danger and protection intertwined. Selene's heart raced not with fear, but with anticipation. She had chosen this moment. She had stepped into the place where her past and present collided, and she would not falter. Darian, sensing that his control was slipping, straightened his back and tried once more to assert himself. "Selene," he said, his voice strained but forceful, "you look different." His words were meant as mockery, yet they revealed his growing fear and confusion. He had expected to see a woman diminished by loss, but he saw strength instead, an unyielding presence that even he could not diminish. Selene's eyes met his with calm authority. "I am the same Selene you knew," she replied softly. "But I have learned who I am beyond what anyone thinks I should be." The hall was silent, the words carrying weight that no wealth or title could oppose. Kaelin shifted slightly, his amber gaze protective and intense, and the tension in the room reached its peak. Then the forest spoke again. A howl, deep and resonant, rolled over the village, carrying an ancient warning. The guests gasped, their curiosity mingling with fear. Darian's confidence wavered as the sound seemed to wrap around the hall, touching each listener with an echo of power older than any crown or kingdom. Selene did not flinch. She knew the significance of the howl. It was a declaration of presence, of power, of a world she had chosen and embraced. And she knew that the man who had once sought to break her would now witness the impossible. The woman he had tried to claim, standing tall and unshakable, beside a king who was both protector and legend. Her lips curved into a faint, enigmatic smile. The night was not yet over, and the story was only beginning. Cliffhanger. A flash of silver and gold appeared at the forest edge as Kaelin stepped fully into view. The candlelight flickered wildly, and the hall seemed to hold its breath. Darian's eyes widened in disbelief and fear. He realized, too late, that Selene was no longer his to mock, and that the night had shifted forever. The hall seemed to shrink beneath the weight of Kaelin's presence. Guests whispered behind their hands, their eyes darting from Selene to the towering figure beside her. He moved with a fluid grace, every motion precise, every gaze measured. His amber eyes glowed faintly in the candlelight, reflecting both the power of the wild and the wisdom of age. Celine felt the familiar pull of his strength, the quiet reassurance that he was more than a guardian. He was a king, yes, but also someone who understood her in ways no human ever could. Their bond had formed in the shadowed forests of the north, through nights of danger and moments of quiet trust. And now, it radiated quietly between them. Darian's face had drained of color. He tried to summon his usual charm, his practiced smile, but it faltered under Kaelin's gaze. The noble guests could sense the shift in power, though they did not understand its source. Whispers spread like fire. Who is this man? What is the connection between him and Celine? Celine walked with measured steps toward the center of the hall, the crowd parting instinctively. Her eyes met Darian's, and she felt a strange mixture of nostalgia, anger, and quiet triumph. This was her chance not to mock him, but to show him the truth. She was not the woman he had known. She had survived betrayal, heartbreak, and the darkness of the wild lands, and she had emerged stronger, more determined, and no longer bound by his opinions or expectations. Kaelin remained at her side, his presence a silent declaration. Celine could feel the tension in the air, the fear that flickered across Darian's features, the unease that had rippled through the room, and yet, she felt a twinge of unease herself, not for what she faced in the hall, but for the storm she knew lurked beyond these walls. There were forces in the world older than the human kingdoms, ancient and unyielding, and she had only begun to touch their edges. Darian stepped forward, forcing a laugh that did not reach his eyes. "Celine," he said, his voice strained. "You've changed, but it seems pride suits you well." His words were meant to sting, but they rang hollow in the presence of Kaelin's quiet authority. Celine tilted her head slightly, the candlelight catching the curve of her cheek. "Pride is earned, Darian," she said softly, her voice carrying through the hall. "It is not borrowed, nor is it taken by those who claim to own it." The words were measured, deliberate. There was no malice, only the quiet certainty of someone who had learned her worth. Darian's jaw tightened. He tried again, this time attempting to assert dominance. "You think your companion here changes anything?" he asked, gesturing subtly at Kaelin. The Lycan King's amber eyes flickered with mild interest, as if acknowledging the challenge without need for words. The room seemed to contract under the silent warning that Kaelin emanated. Celine allowed a faint smile. "He does not change anything about me," she replied. "He reminds me of who I am and who I have chosen to be." Her hand brushed lightly against Kaelin's arm, a gesture that spoke volumes. It was a bond rooted not in fear or obligation, but in mutual respect and shared understanding. The tension between the three of them was a delicate thread, stretching across the room. Darian's arrogance had met its match, and the nobility sensed it. They whispered of curses, of ancient pacts, and of the legends that surrounded the Lycan King. No one dared voice their thoughts aloud. Yet the unease was palpable. Celine's thoughts wandered for a moment, recalling the journey that had brought her here. After Darian's betrayal, she had wandered into the wild lands, places where human laws did not apply, and survival depended on instinct and courage. It was there that she had met Kaelin, under circumstances of peril and necessity. Over time, trust had blossomed into a bond deeper than any she had known before. He had taught her the ways of the clans, the subtle power of the moon, and the balance of strength and restraint. Darian, meanwhile, was struggling to regain composure. His attempts at control were slipping through his fingers like water. Every movement Celine made, every glance she cast, reminded him of the woman he had once underestimated. He felt a mix of frustration, disbelief, and a sting of the old affection he could not fully deny. The bride at the altar shifted nervously, sensing the tension but unable to understand it. She was a pawn in this unspoken game, a symbol of Darian's triumph that had suddenly been overshadowed by forces far beyond her comprehension. Celine moved closer to the center of the room, her gaze steady, her posture regal. Kaelin followed, silent and imposing, yet attuned to every subtle shift around them. Their steps were synchronized, a demonstration of unity and purpose that required no explanation. It was not an act of threat, but of presence, and it was enough to make Darian falter. Finally, he could not contain his frustration. You think you can show up here like this and command respect?" he asked, his voice sharp with anger. The room held its breath. This was the moment where old wounds collided with new power. Celine's lips curved into a calm, knowing smile. "I do not seek respect," she said softly. "I only claim what is mine, my dignity, my choices, and my freedom." Her words were quiet but unyielding. A declaration that echoed louder than any shout. Kaelin's presence beside her was a silent amplification of that truth, a warning that no harm would touch her while he remained. Darian's hands clenched at his sides. He could see it now, the transformation he had failed to anticipate. Celine had grown beyond his reach, beyond the expectations of society, and beyond the limitations he had tried to impose. His plan to mock her, to show her diminished, had collapsed under the weight of her newfound strength. And yet, despite her calm exterior, Celine felt a pulse of tension. The air beyond the windows seemed alive, carrying whispers of old magic and ancient forces. The forest, dark and silent, watched them with intent. She sensed that the night's events were only the beginning, that Darian's arrogance had awakened something older, something that would not yield easily. Kaelin's gaze shifted toward the windows, amber eyes scanning the shadows. Celine felt the subtle change in him, a quiet readiness that signaled danger and vigilance. They had faced threats together before, but the sense of an approaching storm was undeniable. Darian, oblivious to the silent warning, took another step forward. "I won't let you humiliate me," he spat, trying to regain control. But Kaelin's presence was magnetic, the kind of authority that did not rely on words. The tension in the room thickened, and the guests instinctively backed away, creating a clear space between the three of them. Celine's hand brushed Kaelin's lightly again, a gesture of connection and reassurance. She knew that whatever happened next, they would face it together. There was no fear in her, only the certainty of power shared and loyalty earned. Suddenly, the wind outside shifted, carrying a howl that seemed to slice through the hall. It was not the same call as before. It was closer, sharper, filled with a resonance that touched every heart in the room. Guests shivered and whispered, their curiosity and fear mingling in equal measure. Even Darian faltered, his composure cracking under the weight of an ancient presence he could not comprehend. Celine's eyes narrowed, recognizing the significance. The howl was a warning, a signal that forces beyond human reckoning were awake. Kaelin's posture stiffened, muscles taut and alert. The Lycan King's silent readiness spoke volumes, and Celine felt the familiar thrill of the wild, of danger, and of the bond they shared. "Stay close," Kaelin murmured, his voice low but firm, carrying a protective edge. Celine nodded slightly, allowing herself a fleeting moment of calm. She was not afraid, not when he was beside her. Together, they were more than human, more than any threat in the room. The tension reached its peak when Darian, desperate and reckless, made a sudden move, perhaps to confront her directly, perhaps to assert the control he had lost. The guests gasped, sensing the confrontation, and time seemed to slow. Celine's heart raced, not with fear, but with anticipation. The moment was theirs. Every choice, every glance, every unspoken word had led to this intersection of past and present, human and supernatural, love and betrayal. And then, from the shadows of the hall, a faint shimmer of movement appeared, a presence that no one could yet name. The candles flickered wildly, as if reacting to the unseen force. Celine's gaze met Kaelin's, and she knew without words that the night's true challenges were only beginning. Cliffhanger. A sudden, low growl rumbled from the far end of the hall, vibrating through the polished floor. Darian froze, pale and uncertain. Celine's fingers tightened lightly on Kaelin's arm. The hall was silent except for the growl, and in that moment, everyone knew that the night's events were far from over. Something ancient, powerful, and unstoppable was stirring, and Celine and Kaelin would face it together. The hall was tense, every flickering candle casting long, twisting shadows across the polished floor. Guests held their breath, unsure where the danger lay. Celine's eyes scanned the room, taking in the trembling faces, the shifting whispers, and the faint glow that seemed to seep from the far corners of the hall. She could feel it before she saw it, a subtle energy, ancient and dangerous, weaving itself through the air. Darian's face had drained of all color. His arrogance had been his shield, and now it cracked under the weight of Celine's presence and Kaelin's silent authority. He tried once more to force a smile, a last attempt at regaining control. "Celine, you cannot think this changes anything. This man beside you is nothing to me." His voice wavered despite the effort to sound strong. Celine's gaze did not leave his. "I do not seek to change you, Darian," she said calmly. "I only exist. And that existence is enough." Her words were soft, but they carried the weight of iron and the clarity of someone who had survived storms that no human mind could fathom. She felt the pull of the room, the tension, the fear, the curiosity, but she did not falter. Kaelin's presence was like a shadow of night itself, moving silently beside her. Every subtle shift of his body, every flicker of his amber eyes, radiated power. He did not speak, for words were unnecessary. His form, tall and lithe, radiated a quiet dominance that few dared to challenge. The nobles in the hall could feel it, though they could not name it, and the air itself seemed to bend in his presence. Then Darian acted. He moved suddenly, his hand reaching for a small, dark object tucked within his coat. The guests gasped as a faint glow emerged, an artifact. Small but alive with energy. Celine's eyes narrowed. She recognized it instantly. It was cursed, bound to ancient magic older than the human kingdoms themselves. The object hummed with a dangerous rhythm, pulsing with a silent threat that made even the bravest knights take a step back. Kaelin's gaze flicked to the artifact, sharp and calculating. He moved slightly, a subtle motion that warned of action to come. Celine's hand brushed against his arm, not in fear, but in reassurance. "We face this together," she whispered, her voice steady. Kaelin's amber eyes softened, and he gave a slight nod, acknowledging both the danger and their shared trust. Darian's fingers trembled as the artifact glowed brighter. Shadows stretched along the walls, and the air grew colder. The guests shivered, sensing the shift in energy. The cursed object was not just a weapon, it was a statement, a relic of power that could humiliate, harm, or even destroy. Darian thought it would finally break Celine. But he did not understand the woman she had become. Celine stepped forward, her movements deliberate and controlled. "It will not harm me," she said, her voice clear and firm, "and it will not harm anyone here, if you release it." Her words were not a threat, but a command, an acknowledgement that she understood forces far older than any human schemes. Darian sneered, frustration and fear battling within him. "You think you can control it?" he spat. "You..." But his words faltered as Kaelin shifted subtly, the faintest movement radiating the warning that no human could ignore. Kaelin did not raise his hand or growl, yet the very presence of the Lycan king was enough to make Darian hesitate. Celine's mind raced. She had faced threats in the forests, from beasts and clans, from curses older than her ancestors. But she had never faced such a confrontation within walls meant for celebration. And yet, she was not afraid. Her bond with Kaelin gave her a calm that was more powerful than fear. It was rooted in trust, in shared history, and in the understanding that together, they were stronger than any artifact or human ambition. The artifact pulsed again, brighter this time, and the shadows in the room stretched like reaching hands. Guests stumbled backward, some gripping the edges of chairs, some staring wide-eyed at the danger they could neither name nor resist. Darian's eyes darted to Kaelin, then to Celine, and he realized, perhaps too late, that the woman he had underestimated was no longer alone. Kaelin's amber eyes locked onto the object, calculating the energy, sensing its rhythm and its intent. With a motion as swift as moonlight over snow, He stepped closer, and the air seemed to vibrate with tension. Celine felt the connection in the space between them, a silent communication of trust, strategy, and readiness. The bond they shared was not just emotional, it was instinctive, woven through years of danger and survival, and now it guided their actions in perfect harmony. Darian raised the artifact, a last desperate attempt to assert control. The shadows deepened, twisting along the walls, and a low hum vibrated through the hall. Celine's eyes narrowed, and she took a calm, steadying breath. "Stop this, Darian. You cannot control what you do not understand." The artifact flared brightly, sending a pulse of energy across the hall. Guests stumbled, some crying out in alarm, but Kalen moved with quiet precision, shifting his form just slightly, and the energy bent around him. Celine felt the warmth of his presence, the silent reassurance that he would not let harm touch her. Together, they were a force of balance against chaos. Celine stepped closer to Darian. "This ends tonight," she said, her voice carrying a mixture of sorrow and resolve. "Not with anger, not with humiliation, but with truth. You cannot define me anymore." Her words were simple, yet they resonated through the hall, like a bell, clear and unyielding. Darian faltered, uncertainty creeping into his eyes. He had underestimated Celine's growth, her strength, and the mythic bond she shared with Kalen. His plan, meant to humiliate her, was crumbling, leaving him exposed and powerless. Kalen's presence grew more pronounced, his form subtly shifting, a quiet, controlled display of the wolfish power that simmered beneath his human guise. The guests sensed it, their fear mingled with awe, and the room became a stage where the past, the present, and the supernatural collided. For a moment, Celine and Kalen moved as one, a silent dance of strategy and trust. Every gesture, every glance, was in harmony. The artifact's glow began to dim, responding not to force, but to understanding and alignment. Darian's fingers trembled, realizing that the power he thought he controlled was now beyond his reach. Celine's eyes softened as she looked at Kalen. "We are ready," she whispered. Kalen gave a faint nod, acknowledging both her strength and the bond that had carried them through danger before. Together, they had faced threats that no human could survive. And now they faced this one with calm certainty. The artifact flickered one last time, then cracked softly, a harmless spark scattering across the polished floor. The glow faded, leaving the hall in tense silence. Guests exhaled collectively, unsure if the danger had truly passed or merely paused. Darian sank into a chair, pale and defeated, his arrogance shattered by forces he could neither control nor understand. Celine turned to Kalen, a quiet smile on her lips. "It is done," she said softly, though her heart still raced with the thrill of survival and the lingering tension of what had just passed. Kalen's amber eyes held hers, a reflection of pride, trust, and something deeper, a bond that neither time nor circumstance could weaken. And yet, even in that moment of calm, a shadow lingered. Celine could feel it at the edges of the hall, beyond the windows, in the whispering wind. There were forces still awake, ancient powers that watched, waiting for the moment to test her and Kalen further. The night was not yet over. Cliffhanger. A sudden chill swept through the hall as a distant howl rolled over the village, deeper and darker than before. The guests shivered, and Darian's eyes widened in fear. Celine felt Kalen tense beside her. From the shadows beyond the windows, something ancient stirred, a power older than human kingdoms, awakened by ambition and fear. And Celine knew, with a quiet certainty, that the real trials of the night were only beginning. The night had deepened, and a heavy silence pressed against the walls of the hall. The guests, though uneasy, lingered, caught between fear and fascination. Outside, the wind stirred the branches of the forest, carrying a chill that seemed to seep through the very stones. Celine stood at the center, Kalen beside her, both poised and alert. The events of the evening had revealed truths, power, and loyalty that no human plan could disrupt. But something older, far older, still moved in the shadows. Darian slumped in his chair, pale and humiliated. His attempts at arrogance shattered. The cursed artifact lay in harmless fragments on the polished floor. A symbol of his failed ambition, he glared at Celine, eyes clouded with anger, disbelief, and something else, perhaps regret. You think you've won?" he demanded. Though the words sounded hollow even to him, Celine's gaze was steady, unwavering. "I have never sought to win against you, Darian," she said softly. "I have sought only to live as myself, to stand unbroken, and to choose my path. That path is mine alone." Her words were simple, yet their weight carried across the room, silencing whispers and drawing every eye toward her. Kaelin's amber eyes glimmered beside her, a quiet storm of strength and control. He did not need to speak. His presence alone reminded everyone that the world was larger than human pride, that power existed beyond titles and gold. Celine reached out and touched his arm, a gesture of trust and unity. Together, they formed a bond that no fear or deception could sever. But the night's trials were not yet complete. From the shadows beyond the windows, a low growl resonated, carrying the weight of an ancient presence. The air thickened, shadows deepened, and a strange, almost luminous fog began to curl through the hall. Guests shivered, some clutching each other, others frozen in awe. Even Darian looked at the windows with growing terror. Celine's eyes narrowed. She could sense the power, the deliberate, measured force that had been watching since she arrived. It was older than kingdoms, older than kings, yet aware of every heartbeat, every breath. She drew in a steadying breath and whispered, "We face this together." Kaelin inclined his head, his amber gaze steady, his body tensing in readiness. The fog thickened and swirled, forming shapes at the edges of vision, shadowed figures that seemed to watch, to judge, to measure the worth of those within the hall. One figure stepped forward, cloaked in darkness, eyes gleaming like shards of moonlight. It was a guardian of the old world, a being bound to ancient laws, called forth by Darian's arrogance and the disturbance of the cursed artifact. Darian stumbled back, fear breaking the last threads of his pride. He had meddled with forces beyond his understanding and had underestimated the bond between Celine and Kaelin. The guardian's presence filled the hall with a quiet, suffocating power that reminded everyone of the fragility of human ambition. Celine stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "We mean no harm," she said. "We respect the old laws. We only seek to live in honor and truth." Her words were not a plea, but a declaration. Kaelin's form shifted slightly, wolfish grace rippling beneath human skin, his presence amplifying the weight of her conviction. The guardian studied her, every movement precise, as if weighing her soul. The tension was unbearable, yet Celine did not falter. She knew that fear was useless here. Only courage, truth, and loyalty could carry them through. Kaelin's hand brushed lightly against hers, a silent reassurance that she was not alone. Together, they were a force of balance against the storm of ancient power. The fog stirred, the guardian's eyes glinting brighter, and a voice echoed in the hall, not loud, but deep, resonant, and filled with timeless authority. "Why do you trespass in the weave of old law? Who stands worthy in the shadow of legacy?" Celine's voice rang clear, unwavering. "I am Celine, and I stand with one who honors the old ways. We do not seek dominion, only life and loyalty. We face what comes with courage, and we act with truth." Her words were simple, yet they carried a force that shook the hall and drew attention to the power of her resolve. Kaelin stepped slightly forward, his amber eyes locking with the guardian's. "She speaks truth," he said quietly but firmly, "and I stand with her. We offer loyalty and respect. Do not mistake strength for arrogance." His words carried weight, echoing the authority of the Lycan king, a ruler of clans who had walked through centuries of struggle, trust, and survival. For a moment, the fog seemed to pause, the air holding its breath. Then, slowly, the guardian nodded, as if acknowledging the sincerity and bond before it. The shadowed forms at the edges receded. The luminous fog dissipated, and a quiet calm returned to the hall. Guests exhaled collectively, their fear giving way to awe. Darian slumped further, pale and defeated. His attempts to control the evening fully collapsed. Celine felt a wave of relief, but she did not lower her guard. The night had tested her resolve, her strength, and the depth of her bond with Kaelin. Now, in the quiet aftermath, she realized something deeper had been affirmed. She was free from the shadows of the past, free from Darian's attempts to manipulate or diminish her, and stronger for having faced forces beyond human understanding. She turned to Kaelin, and their eyes met. In that silent exchange, everything was said: trust, respect, unspoken love, and the understanding that they had survived something extraordinary together. The bond between them was not merely romantic, it was forged in the fires of danger, tempered by loyalty, and sealed by mutual courage. Kaelin gave a faint, approving nod. "You have faced this well," he said softly, "and you have chosen wisely. Our path is not simple, but together we can endure anything." His voice was calm yet carried the weight of centuries, a reminder of the life he had lived and the power he wielded with honor. Celine smiled faintly, her heart swelling with quiet pride and relief. "I know," she replied, "and I choose this path with you, beside me. Not ahead or behind, but together." Her words were simple, yet they carried the weight of every trial, every memory, and every choice she had made since leaving Darian's shadow behind. Darian, meanwhile, sat slumped in his chair, utterly defeated. He could see it now: the woman he had tried to mock, belittle, and control was beyond his reach. He had underestimated her, underestimated the bond she shared with a power far greater than his understanding. Pride, ambition, and arrogance had failed him, leaving only the stark clarity of loss and regret. The guests, witnessing the aftermath, were silent, awed by the spectacle of strength, loyalty, and ancient power. The wedding had transformed into something more than a human celebration. It had become a testament to courage, choice, and the enduring bond between two beings who had faced the impossible together. Celine and Kaelin walked toward the windows, the forest beyond shimmering in silver moonlight. The night was calm now, but it carried a promise. The world was vast, filled with dangers, mysteries, and ancient powers yet to be tested. Together, they were prepared. Together, they were unstoppable. Kaelin glanced at Celine, a faint smile touching his lips. "Are you ready?" he asked, not as a question of fear, but of shared adventure and trust. Celine nodded, feeling the weight of the night lift and the warmth of their connection settle over her like a protective cloak. "Always," she replied, her voice steady, filled with quiet certainty. Hand in hand, they stepped out into the forest, the moonlight casting silver paths across the ground. Wolves howled in the distance, a harmonious response to Kaelin's presence, and the wind carried whispers of old magic and new beginnings. The world beyond the hall awaited a realm of possibility, loyalty, and love, forged through trials. As they vanished into the trees, the village seemed to hold its breath, witnessing not just the departure of two figures, but the passage of a legend. Celine had reclaimed her life, her power, and her choices. Kaelin had proven that strength and compassion could coexist, and together they had faced the darkness of the night and emerged triumphant.